Food for mood. Hello everyone, welcome to Signposts for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter, and we have got the most gorgeous Taylah Teschner here. Hello gorgeous, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I say that from the bottom of my heart, I know that.
I believe you, and thank you. I feel the same way about you.
So everyone, we're here to talk about food for mood, which I think everyone can relate to, and we're all trying to figure ourselves out. It's a permanent state really, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
So, gorgeous Taylah, tell me what are your qualifications? What brings you to this topic?
So, I am a clinical naturopath, which means what I started doing was when I left school, I went to uni, and it's like a college, and I studied a Bachelor of Health Science to become a naturopath. And that means that I can help people with a variety of things, but one of the major areas we work on is nutrition. So basically we do like a nutrition degree within that degree. So then that covers food, lifestyle changes. We learn about everything really, biochemistry, chemistry, biology, so the whole lot. And so we know a lot about the human body, which then I now apply in clinic. And I have a clinic in Toowoomba. So I was in Brisbane, moved back to Toowoomba. Now I've got a clinic here where I see clients each and every week.
There you go, keep you busy. So you said a clinical
naturopath.
Yeah. So what does clinical mean?
Basically just means you're working in the clinic so some people, apply their degree to maybe research or, supplementation work or, another way. So we call it a clinical naturopath, which just means we're in the clinic seeing clients.
Okay, so to a relatively ignorant person like me on this topic, how is a naturopath different to a nutritionalist? And then there's another one, isn't there?
A dietitian.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
I know I've asked you this before, and I tried to retain that information. Clearly didn't work. I'm thinking one's more medical model.
Yeah, so the dietitian is more of a medical model, so that falls under basically like the food pyramid that we all know and love.
So you're joking, right?
Yeah, I'm joking.
Good.
So the dietitian works, and that's definitely not against a dietitian. That's what they're good at. So they work more in the hospital systems to work with people in hospital, coming out of hospital. They can have their own private practices as well.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll work alongside a doctor. Whereas a naturopath and a nutritionist can be its own degree. So you can do a nutrition degree, but because I did the naturopathy degree, that encompasses a nutrition degree. So you can't technically call yourself a nutritionist because in theory a naturopath is a nutritionist within the degree, if that makes sense.
Wow. So it's like one of the bricks in your foundation.
Yeah. So I actually went to the student advisors and I said, can I do nutrition on top of this? Because I wanted to be technically a naturopath and nutritionist. And she said, no, because you're doing the degree right now. And that was that.
So could you put that on your post-nominals?
No, it'd be NAT, N-A-T for naturopath.
There you go.
Yeah, it's one of those things that a lot of people don't realise. I think too because a naturopath hasn't always been a degree qualified profession. So it's only really, I'm going to say in the last, 10, 15 years that they've actually decided to make it a degree qualification. So before it was like a diploma or you could do an online course, which I think you still can, which is kind of dodgy. But now there are naturopaths out there who have done a Bachelor of Health Science and then their specialty is naturopathy.
There you go.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, my brain just goes woof.
Yeah.
All these things I want to ask you. How did you come to this from school?
So another great question, and I have thought about this a lot because a lot of people ask me that, and I grew up with a mum as a nurse. So my mum was a nurse.
Medical model?
Very medical model, yeah. Not like so far one way or the other way, but definitely I definitely didn't know what a naturopath was when I left school, which is wild. So then very long story short, but when I first moved to Brisbane, my dad was actually dying of prostate cancer.
Yeah.
And I was at an appointment with him one day, just sitting in the reception room with all of those wonderful books. And one of the books was about nutrition for prostate cancer. And of course, being 18 and like clinging onto anything that might help, I was like, okay, there's going to be something in this book. Like, what else could we be doing? Unfortunately, Dad was in end stage cancer, so look, that was a little too far gone. But it was the first moment that I remember thinking, there's more than just the medical model. Like, there has to be more to this. Like, how else can we be supporting?
This concept of how you care for your body means the body's health. Imagine that.
You're right. And also, like, prevention was a big thing for me. It's like, prevention rather than cure, which is a big thing that we're taught at uni. A lot about prevention rather than cure. So really focusing on what you could be doing to try and get yourself not in that situation where you are sitting in a hospital waiting room, I suppose.
Yeah.
So then, I think I Googled like natural health or natural medicine or something like that, and that's what popped up. Went to an interview and loved it, and I was all in. I was doing occupational therapy before that.
Were you really?
Yeah. And I dabbled in psych for a little while and looked at the statistics, and I was like, not for me.
Well, not many people want to be statisticians, do they?
Oh, yuck.
Theoretically, I'm a statistician.
Yeah, the amount of theory that I saw was math in a psychology degree was terrifying.
1/4 of the degree is stats. I hate stats. I had to do it. I had to kind of like, crawl my way over the hot coals to come to the other side, and then promptly dumped all that knowledge from my brain.
It's a lot.
Don't use up your brain with stats, people.
That's the end. Life lesson.
Oh my god. Okay, so I'm gonna put aside some of my questions so that we can kind of get to where we're going to go and then come back, because that's how we work. Food for mood.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes.
Talk to me. Where does your brain go to with that topic?
I think just what I think of instantly is the clients that I see in clinic, because I think clinic is the place that I have learned the most. You can learn all the things in theory at uni, and then you get into clinic and you're like, you know what, I actually knew not much. This is where the real learning takes place. And so I think what I realised was, I think I always underestimated the amount of how much food could impact mental health, how much food and good eating could impact mental health, but also emotional health. And it wasn't until I think you see people's lives literally change because their mind and their mental well-being is healthier. So then therefore they're more motivated to exercise, or, the on-flow of that is massive. That was when I first, started to realise, I guess, the severity or the enormity of it.
And when you say clinic, we're talking about your practice where people come in and they have appointments and they say, what's the typical appointment when the first person comes in?
So in the little form that they fill out,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, in the little form they'll fill out and I say, what are your top 3 concerns? What are the things you're here for today? And very commonly there's like anxiety, stress, hormonal imbalances, thyroid issues. Can be a range of things. And within that consult, then a part of that is delving into obviously what they do in their lifestyle, their blood tests, different functional testing that we can do, but also their diet is a massive part of it. So I sit and talk to them like, okay, literally what do you eat? Tell me from start to finish. And so that's like a good half of it is almost re-educating them on like good nutrition. Yeah. And I think a lot of people know what they need to do, but sometimes they just need help navigating all of the information out there, because I think that's a massive thing too, is there's so much information.
I've actually seen the population divided into 3. I've seen the people who know what they should do, but they've struggled to find the motivation or to do it, or they're having some sort of peak with regard to stress or anxiety, so they're reaching for comfort foods. Yeah. So majority of the population. Yeah. I see a small subset of people who genuinely just don't have a clue. Yeah. They've been brought up with parents who have done fad dieting. They haven't had nutritional typical foods. They really, they know more about growing up on a shake than they do actual food. Yeah. Or the family have had a background of lots of really bad junk food and they have to start from the beginning. But then I've got this third group. See, our world's overlapping, hey? Aren't they? But it is. We talk a lot. I talk a lot about, healthy lifestyle to increase the probability of having, self-love and good energy and mood, obviously. But the other group are those who are the denial people that say, I eat really well. They're my favourite. and they really don't. I know, God bless. And I might hear from family, that they have to eat the food off everyone's plate. or I'm just going to have a bit of this and a bit of that, or I've had a salad, but now I'm going to go have some cheesecake.
Yeah.
Which is completely their choice.
Like totally fine.
Totally
but let's
fine.
not say you eat well.
But they're just, honestly, the level of denial is absolute. So I don't know about you, but they're the three groups I see.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And yeah, that's one of my favorite. I say they're my favorite people because it's like they're in my room wanting help, and the thing that is wrong with them is so obvious to me, but they're like, no, but that's not it. And I'm like, no, but I think that actually is your food. So then I have to explain that to them and really break it down. It's almost like crushing their hearts a little bit, because I'm like, this section of your life.
What do you say to them to communicate how food impacts their mood?
I think I draw a lot of graphs.
Do you?
Yeah, because I try to explain it like what's physically happening in your body when you have those foods, and then I try to use symptoms that they might say that they're there with. So they'll say, I'm tired during the day, or I get that massive energy slump at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I'll say, okay, so what have you had for breakfast? What have you eaten for lunch? And it's full of carbs. There's not really any full nutrient dense energy food in there. They're living off caffeine, for example, and then they're just having a massive crash at 2, 3 o'clock. So I draw it like a little graph. So you've eaten this food and your blood sugars are up, and then, half an hour later, boom, they're down. And then they're like, oh yeah, that actually does happen. That's when I usually go for another piece of cake, or I have that slice that Jenny from the office brought in, or, so I try to get it to them to see the relation of that and how that applies to them. But a lot of people don't put that association with what they're putting in their mouths and how much that actually is impacting their entire day. And then the on-flow of that is their sleep. And then the next day their mental health. And then the next day is their hormones are affected. So, yeah, it's very, like you said, a ripple effect.
And it is a ripple, but it's also this continual kind of perpetuating cycle, isn't it? Because if you're not feeling good, you're going to be less motivated to make good choices. Yes. And then you make poor choices, and then you feel crappier, and it goes round and round.
Yeah, and I'll start on Monday, attitude, or start on Monday culture. So I say to people, the key is like just stop trying to put so much pressure on doing it perfectly and just do one little thing right, and then that has a ripple effect. Okay, well, I've done this really good breakfast for myself, so I'm going to keep the momentum going.
Let's lock that habit in. Just
do one little thing, like eat before your first coffee, or make sure you're having something, like sitting and having a meal in the morning and not just eating it in the car while you're screaming at the kids. So like do things that are actually nourishing you and your lifestyle and your mental health, and then watch the on-flow effect of the day, and people make better choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you well, here goes my brain again. So you would be interviewing them, working out the lay of the land with regard to what their problem area is, what their, what the patterns are that aren't great, their knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, that's a big one.
The intake's going to be, what's the intake like for you?
As in, what are the kind of questions that I'm asking them?
Yeah.
Or
what's your brain doing? Because I know you, and everyone, she's got a gorgeous brain.
It's a manic little brain.
you want Taylor's brain, and you're going to be and I know that I do that clinically, so I guess I want to know more about your brain.
Yes. I love my brain in the clinic. It's actually quite fun, and I sometimes forget that I have expressions on my face when I'm listening to them, because they're like talking.
You are very expressive.
Yeah, they're talking to me, and they're like, oh, and then I do this, and I'm like, and then it's like, and then I get this little smirk on my face, and they're probably looking at me like, oh my gosh, why is she smirking? And I'm like, it's because it's all coming together, So for me, it's like I really want to know them. And when you first come out of uni, or you're learning about clinical, like being in a clinic, it was so much about like, what are the right questions to ask? But what I'm finding out more now is like finding out what kind of person is this? Like, who am I dealing with? Because there are those people who are ready for it. Let's go. What do I need to do? I'm so literally here. And so the questionnaire is like kind of the same in all of them, but then you'll get those people who are, that they can only take on like 5%. Like they've only got a very small capacity for how much information they can take on today, and also how much knowledge they already have. Yeah. So it's very different, but for me, it's like getting to know them as a person, so then I can understand how to treat, you know, so it's like how much can they take, because you can ask them about their poo and you can ask them about their bloating and their periods and all the things, but it's like at the end of the day, what kind of person am I dealing with? Because, you know, what you can give to one person, what you can give to another is two different things.
Absolutely. And what I love is, you know, as a naturopath, you're looking at the body.
Yeah.
But what you're actually talking about is their psychology.
Yeah, I love the psych part of it. I swear I like
you started studying it. You ended up doing it.
I hear myself and I'm like, Kirsten would say something like that. I'm legit.
Oh, but seriously, it is really about working out where that person is in their knowledge and motivation, self-awareness.
Yes, because there's no
defenses.
Point. Yeah.
Defenses would be big, wouldn't they?
Yes, yeah. And there's just no point, you know, giving someone who's maxed out with stress, they've got nothing left in their little brains, but to then say like, righto, I want you to eat this, don't do that, drink this, take this, don't eat that, don't go for a walk every day, make sure you do this. And they're like, well, I'm not doing any of that because I'm done. I'm like here for a 1% change. And then other people you can give that to, but if you read the person properly, then you can really, really help them, because then they know you're on their level, you're on their team, you're not here to make their life harder. And then it's just about getting them to trust me, to implement those changes, make the good things happen. They go, and that's like on them, you know, like that's where I get so proud of people, because I can say, you know, go and do A, B, and C, but they've got to go home and apply it. So they go home, they come back, and they're super proud of themselves, and they can feel the difference. It's funny because then there's always this like last week before they get back to me where they're like, and I've just fallen off the bandwagon. That's what they'll always say. And I'll say, it's actually not falling off the bandwagon, but how did you feel in that week? And they're like, oh, back to rubbish. I was having energy slumps and I wasn't sleeping well again. And I'm like, no, that's a learning week. That was the week that you're like, see the difference. Now you can see that you need to get back on board, you know? So it's good for them. It's just a massive educational experience.
And you're basically saying, I'm happy to walk with you at the pace that you're ready.
Yeah. Yeah, like let's just do it together. And then, you know, and that's better. And I think that's the biggest thing that I learned in clinic was stop trying to apply the same rules to everyone. It just doesn't work. Everyone's different.
Tailor it.
Tailor it. I should have made my business that name.
Oh, you still could.
Tailor-made. Tailor-made naturopathy.
You would have thought of that.
Yeah, I did. You got me. It's too much of a cliche.
Oh, that's hilarious. So do people come in and say, I want to look at the food that affects my mood? Or do you just say, okay, this is actually where we're going to go?
Yeah, I think people know enough now that like, okay, yeah, my food, what am I eating? I think they've come to that conclusion. They just don't know literally how to implement that, because a lot of people just say there's just so much information, like Instagram says this, and I heard on the news that this was this, and the blog, and then I read this thing, and I'm like, how about we just don't with all of that information?
Stop.
And how about we just go back to the basics? And it's honestly that simple, but people just need you to help them like break it down and then make it relevant for them. So that's why I also like question so much about their lifestyle, because I'm like, well, what do you do in the day? Like, when do you wake up? What's your morning like? You know, I'm not going to ask you to make a bacon and egg frittata every morning if you've got 3 screaming kids. Like, you've just got to make it realistic for them as well. So again, it's not just about like what looks good on paper, but what actually looks good in their life. So, yeah, it's just about, making it individual.
Incredibly practical.
Yeah, it has to be practical. It really does. And so people then will come and I'll say, okay, you've got anxiety. Anxiety can be because of A, B, and C, you know, it can be because of this, can be that. So then let's change the things we have control of, you know, and a massive part of they might not have control of why their anxiety's there, but, you know, you do have control about what you put in your mouth. You do have control about, you know, usually how much you sleep or, you know, what you exercise. Like, what else are you doing to help that or hinder it?
Yeah.
So it's, I think a lot of people know that their mental health has been in, well, I think they know enough that food and mental health go together. I think most people know that, not everyone, but I think vast majority, it's just about then helping them put the connection together.
Okay, I'm going to ask a really weird question.
No, go. Love a weird question.
Okay. So I understand, obviously, emotional intelligence. Is there a word for being in tune with your body and knowing, okay, I feel this way because I've made this choice, or because this is, you know, I've eaten this, or I haven't slept here, or I haven't done this exercise, or and I don't know if it's called body attunement, or is there language around that?
There is, and I feel like there is a word, but maybe it'll come to me. I say to people, it's like about being aware. It's awareness. It's awareness probably, like, is the simple word to put with it. But I think getting people to be aware of their behaviours, and then what they're doing and how that's impacting them is massive. And that's another big point, because sometimes I think just they can't see objectively what they're doing because they're just in the rat race of go, we're doing, we're going. So when you get them to stop and you're like, look, can you see how this, and this, or can you see how you're eating this, and this, or you're not taking any time in the week for yourself, how that would, contribute to your anxiety or to why you feel tired all the time. So yeah, it is a big part of them learning to be self-aware. Self-awareness probably is the good way to put it. Yeah, self-awareness. And then it's actually the most satisfying thing for me when people say to me, oh, and then I realized that, I hadn't done A, B, and C, and then I really felt this, and this. And before they're just like, I don't know, honestly, some people can't even tell me how many times a day they go to the toilet for number 2. Because they don't know, they don't tune in. Like, they're just like, I don't know, like, I think I went today, I think I went yesterday, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? And then they come back and they're like, Taylah, I know. I've been tracking it for you and I know about it. I'm like, good, we need to know about that. So that is a big part of it, is just like getting them in tune with themselves.
So you're paying a lot of attention to what goes in and what goes out.
I love the out. The out tells you everything. It's just like... It
tells you about how much fibre they're having, exercise,
healthy,
water.
Yeah, and like people... Yeah, if people who have, like for example, I don't know, like so much oversharing. But poo to me is not a weird question or topic anymore. But, people say I have chronic constipation, but
I'm very comfortable with poo.
Good, yeah, good.
So
me
let's
too.
go with poo.
Yeah.
I'm good.
I reckon... I was just going to say, I think I heard recently there's a study that showed that a good poo is gives you the same satisfaction as getting paid. Like that kind of relief and satisfaction. So you know what?
I've had one person say to me, a good poo is the same as pleasurable as an orgasm.
Yeah. You know what? I would go with that. I agree.
Yeah.
But I think getting them, so I say, right, how many times a day do you go to the toilet? They're like, a day? I go 3 times a week. Isn't that normal? And I'm like, no, see, it's not. Self-awareness. So, that person might have, like really bad acne or extreme bloating or a lot of food sensitivity. So then that really opens up the questioning as to like, okay, well, what's going on inside of your little stomach?
Yeah.
That could be creating all of these symptoms.
Because the bowels communicate what?
As in, like, what does it tell us?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it tells you, if they're eating something that doesn't agree with them.
Right.
Stress can be a big contributor to constipation as well, or the same with like loose bowel motions. People get very anxious. It's that whole gut-brain connection. So if there's a lot of, anxiety or stress, people will say, I think I have IBS, or like, they've got a lot of anxiety, so their stomach is really upset. So we know that connection happens. So it kind of gives us an insight to what's happening, not just in the gut, like, physically happening, like bacteria and stuff, but also what's happening with your stress levels, what's happening with your nervous system.
So it must be a bit of a fishing trip to work out what it could be.
It is, but yeah, it is.
You like a Rubik's Cube, don't you?
Yeah. But at the same time, it's funny because, so many people have the same things going on for them. People, it's a similar concept. It's like overstress, not eating well, poor sleep, not enough time on their hands, no self-care. It's a similar picture for a lot of people. So it's like once you apply one rule, you can kind of read the person pretty quickly. But I think that helps. But also we have functional testing that shows us, things that are actually happening in the gut, what is happening with their hormones, what are their blood tests showing. So, a lot of that information can help us form the picture too.
Getting all the test results in.
Yeah, and super satisfying to me.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like on a Friday night, they always seem to come in on a Friday night for stool tests. Like we do like...
You get excited by stool tests.
And literally it's like 8 o'clock and I'm like at a party or like a wedding or something and I'm like... Oh, blah blah blah, still just came in and I'm on my phone like scrolling because I just love knowing it. Just it just brings me so much satisfaction. I'm like, yes, now we know how to deal with it.
Oh, which actually says how much information comes from those tests.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and it's a massive, wonderful thing that we have now access to, because I think a lot of people also think traditional naturopaths just had like the eyes, a skin prick and your tongue to read and your nails, and that was like, oh, now you've got A, B, and C. Like, I mean, we do value that, traditional knowledge of naturopathy, but naturopaths and their, ability to test now has come a long way.
Yeah.
Which is really good. And that's how we can then start to merge with that beautiful Western medicine model, so we can really be working with both. It's not like you have to be choosing natural health or you have to choose a GP.
That's a ridiculous premise.
Yeah, it is, in my opinion. I agree.
Do you know what I mean? We're looking at how the body works with a lot of intricate knowledge. And then we've got the medical model, which is probably pathology based, what's wrong with the body.
Yeah.
And those two, I think, are coming from two different directions.
Yeah.
Not that neatly, but yeah.
Yeah. And it's got to be a nice form between the two. It has to, you have to have the both. It's you can't choose one or the other.
No.
Oh, you can. You shouldn't.
Actually, that's one of the things I was going to mention. I was talking to someone who is a GP and was having medical problems and not just had hit all the walls, And I suggested that they came and saw you. And
how did that get received?
Well, not well.
Yeah.
Not well. It was, I couldn't possibly, that's kind of, we're very uncomfortable with that framework. It's, it was almost like it was taboo or just sort of, I don't know, but definitely a big wall went up.
Yeah.
And do you get that? Do you get that in the medical world?
Yeah. And I mean, less so now, and I don't let it, I guess people always say that to me. They're like, oh, doesn't it bother you? And I'm like, not really, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. Everyone's educated in a certain way. Everyone's allowed to have...
I would say they're not educated with regard to this.
Yeah, no, and that's, and so I think a big missing link, and that's what I was saying before, is like, I think what people don't understand, and probably a lot of GPs don't understand, is that like we study a lot now, but it wasn't always like that. And so, you know what, I'm with GPs that there are backyard naturopaths.
Are there?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. It's actually...
Is it regulated?
Not very well.
Right, so that's not helpful, is it?
It's not helpful.
So would you like it to be more regulated?
I would love for it to be more regulated, because then you get rid of the backyard naturopaths who make the GPs want to die. And I'm like, you know what, fair enough, because they're like mixing up this and putting in that and giving people this, and it can be a massive rip-off. People always, it's an expensive industry. So yeah, I've also unfortunately heard plenty of instances where people have come in and they've said, oh, you're my second naturopath because the first one A, B and C. It's like any professional though. There's good ones and there's bad ones.
There are.
And there's also people that you connect with and you don't connect with. But I've also found that in this community, I've had also wonderful connections with a lot of GPs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've had a lot of work alongside of GPs. Like a lot of GPs will say, oh, yep, you're going back to Taylah. Great, take them with you. She'll sort it out. And that's so cool. So,
well, I know GPs who have clients with cancer who are about to go through chemo, and they go, okay, go see this person because that's going to really kind of steer you through. Yeah. And they're a naturopath. It's great. Yeah,
and that's how it should be. If you want the holistic approach, for your client, it's not about who does better, who's going to win to make this better person better. It's just about who, it's the whole thing. It's
so in your free time, you could go and steer this whole regulatory board to regulate. I have trouble with the word
naturopathy. I used to call it naturopathy, and then someone was like,
naturopathy.
It sounds so pretentious.
I want to learn that word. That's a cool word, naturopathy.
Yeah.
It's a cool word. It's very cool.
It sounds way cooler than it is.
It's very cool. So how do you go with people who want to walk in and have you fix them, and they don't understand that it comes with them, implementing their new self-awareness and taking responsibility in their learning? Does that happen in your world?
Oh, yeah. And yeah, lots. And I think, again, I've gotten really good at reading those people. I can read them from like the first 10 minutes of the consult, like where they're at. And so usually, I still go through the same process. I still ask them the same questions. I still just put just as much effort in, even though I know they're not in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
But what I find really great about those clients is that like 6 to 12 months later, they'll be back and they're like, you know what? I wasn't ready then, but I'm ready now. And then they do it, and they do it so well.
Well, that's awesome.
So something emotionally has blocked them, or they're not ready there. Like they're not there yet.
Yep.
They've got to go away and do other things. And then equally, there's those people who come in and they actually have, a lot of emotional stuff going on, and they've got a lot of mental health stuff. And I just say to them, you know what? Put your money, put your resources, put your time into that, and then come back. Because sometimes you've just got to pick your battles. And they want to do so well by themselves, but I also know that I'm almost setting them up for failure. And then that would feel so bad if I'm like, oh, go and do A, B, and C, and I know that they mentally are not there.
Yep.
That's just going to make them feel worse.
Yeah.
So I don't want them to fail. But then sometimes I break up with people too, so sometimes there's only a small handful, but they'll keep coming back. They come back on the dot every appointment, and they'll buy the supplements, they'll do this, but they don't actually do any of it. Like, they'll come and they'll turn up and then they'll say, yeah, I just haven't done it again. I'm so busy. And I'm like, you know what? How about we just don't for a little while? I like slowly break it off with them. And I'm like, how about you come back and don't waste your money and your time? You come back when you're ready. And, and then they're like, yeah, that might be a good idea. So I just pick the person. Yeah, you just got to get a good
It's really where they're at, hey?
Totally, yeah. And it's not a flaw. It just is they're not ready.
And, in the psychology world, there's an absolute parallel. When people present, I don't launch into therapy by any means. It's really kind of where are you at with your motivation, taking ownership, your level of insight. And that has to be lined up before we launch into the doing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're kind of like banging them over the head.
Totally,
Yeah, and so sometimes it's really about just getting that motivation going. And they might have turned up because they felt obliged to, or they were upset by family, or, subject to, if you don't come, we're having a divorce, things like that.
Yeah.
So, I don't do therapy with that unless that person is like, desperately like, I want this, I want to grab this, let's run with it.
Yeah,
so it's a very motivational model.
Yeah, and you can see the difference, or a lot of, like in my situations, like husbands that the women have made go. They're like, I'm like, oh, why are you here? And they're like, my wife made me. She thinks I drink too much. She thinks she's sick of how I'm eating, or, so... Yeah, but you can pick and choose, and, then they'll, you can kind of wait to see them, ebb and flow, and they'll do they'll have a good crack at it, but, yeah. And then they come back when they're ready, or they don't, and that's okay too.
I see a real parallel between alcohol abuse, or people trying to get off alcohol, people who are using marijuana particularly, sometimes cigarettes, but that's a little bit different, and then what you're talking about, people who are trying to really... get into a good healthy regime where they're embracing their body rather than making choices where they don't feel good, and it is that whole stop and reflect. What are you doing now? What's happening in your day? How are you setting yourself up for success or failure? How's your mood? How's your energy? Why are you making the easier, not good choice rather than what can we do? And so I see it as kind of untangling and just increasing that intricate self-awareness.
Yes.
But I really see a parallel with all those areas.
Yes, and it's
hugely.
It's psychology, at the end of the day, like where are they at mentally means everything for their physical. It's, if they're mentally not there and they're really not invested, or they're there because someone told them they had to be, well, like they're not ready. Or but the same goes with a woman who's super stressed out, like rushing around like a mad woman and wants to lose 10 kilos, but like has no spare time in the day to do anything. She has to assess her life. She has to assess like what's going on and for her, and how does she prioritize that, because you can't just, drop 10 kilos because now you've just decided to take this one supplement. Like, it doesn't work like that.
That sounds like another podcast.
We could go into that.
Okay, so here's another area. I've always wanted to ask you this.
Yes.
So when it comes to eating, okay, let's go back. You made a bit of a groan, and as did I, with the food pyramid early on. So my understanding of the food pyramid was that it was set up in America when the corn and wheat industry had a lot of power, and there was an original food pyramid that kind of came to be looked at, and then the political power kind of said, no, we're not happy with this. We want this to actually reflect money. Yeah. And originally they had fruit and veggies at the bottom, I believe, and then the wheat industry said, no, we're really not happy with that. We want wheat to be the base, the carbs to be the base. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah. I wouldn't say like I know exactly, but that is, I know that a lot of that model is based around money. And big corporations. Yeah. I don't quote me, because I haven't actually looked at a food pyramid in a very long time, but I actually think fruit and veg are back on the base.
So my understanding is that, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, they redid the food pyramid to the original food pyramid.
Yes, okay.
Taking out the wheat industry so that they didn't get to buy the bottom slab.
Yep.
Basically.
Dense
I
slab.
fully researched this.
Oh, that's so cool.
Because, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And I was really astounded by the whole American political component and how they had so much power.
It's very political. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess that leads into my question. So there's all these different eating regimes. Now, that's enough to make you go crazy.
Yeah.
And
throw your hands in the air and be like, stuff it, I'll just eat something.
Well, it's like, what is the truth? What is... And so, help me with the word
naturopathy.
Oh, I'm never going to get naturopathy. I'm going to practice it in the shower.
It's fine, yeah.
Surely you must have a basic foundation where you cut through all the trends.
Yeah.
This is my question. What do you do with the trends?
Yes, we throw the trends out the window. I think we acknowledge them, and there are diets that are well researched. So for example, the keto diet, can work fabulously for a certain person, and there is a great amount of research with cardiovascular disease, epilepsy, things like that. But then you've just also got to apply that to a real person. So that's what I always remember with all of these fads and the trends. You can't
live on a keto diet.
Correct. Well, like in long term, that's probably not going to be good for you anyways, or that doesn't apply to you because, again, like you're different to me. So what I can eat and what I should eat is going to be different again. But then that shouldn't let you get confused. And this is where I say to people, go back to basics. Stop being so confused about what to eat and just eat foods that don't have a label potentially, and that's a really good start.
Farm food,
like from the ground, off a tree, from an animal. Keep it simple. Just go back to the things that I always say your great grandparents ate. Probably not even our grandparents anymore. Our great grandparents. What did they have access to? They probably had their own crops. No, probably not great grandparents, but great. They had their own crops. They had their own cows. They had their own chickens. They had a veggie patch. Let's go back to that. Yep. Because that model seemed to work pretty well, and yes, other diseases seem to kill people sooner because there wasn't the medical advances that we have now, but there was nowhere near the rates of cardiovascular disease and cancer and mental health and all the things that go with that. So I just say to people, like, stop thinking about it so much and just go back to what is good food. And if you can walk around the outside of the supermarket and you can get your grocery shop done, you're going pretty good.
So here in Australia, don't pay GST.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And if you're looking at and I think that's the other thing is people are so overstimulated with options. Like there's like 7 types of milks. So I'm like, just go with the one that has the least amount of ingredients, or go with the one that you can actually understand the ingredient list and you actually know what those words are, then probably your body knows what that is. So that's okay. Just try to not go with those things that have like 57 numbers in it and like 10 chemical names, and you'll be fine. So I think it's a lot about just going back to basics and then applying that to the person themselves. So,
and what about when people say, but I've got a calorie count?
Oh, I can't deal with the calorie counting thing. I can't. I say, I can't.
But your framework obviously doesn't agree with that.
It doesn't agree with that because
all calories are the same.
But yeah, that's right. And how boring.
Yeah, but they're not the same. Calories are not the same.
They're not. And so people are like, fat.
The fundamental premise is wrong.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree. Yes, I agree. And people say to me like, but I'm going to have all those nuts. Geez, that's high in calories. And I'm like, did a nut ever kill any person other than someone who had an allergic reaction? Did that thing over time really make the biggest difference to your weight loss journey? Probably not. Calories counting, I think, can be a really good way of learning if you have absolutely no way of portion controlling and you don't know how to portion control. I think calorie counting can be a really good awareness method, but then it should be dropped. My personal opinion on people who calorie count is just missing the half of life. And
a high need for control.
Yes, which then says so much about that person. So instantly, if they're in here in my office and they're like, okay, I calorie count, I've been exercising 6 times a week and I'm doing A, B and C, I'm like, whoa, their little nervous system. Like instantly I'm like, fight or flight, so they're in the go mode, so I've got to kind of like break it really slowly down to them.
And eating disorders are predominantly about control.
Yeah.
So we're screaming in that direction, aren't we?
Yeah. And you can have like the whole, I think anything done too much is a problem. It's the same as like eating well. People get so fixated on what to eat right and I need to be healthy, and that can be really detrimental to your health too. It's just about finding this balance and then not beating yourself up about it if you have a crap day. And I say to clients every time they walk out of my room, remember you're going to have a crap day. Remember there's going to be roadblocks. just remember that that's just a day in the grand scheme of your life. Wake up tomorrow, do it better again. You know, it doesn't matter. Just prepare for it. And so it's just about, go back to basics and give yourself a break. Just stop trying to apply so many rules to something that never should have had rules.
And there's that black and white. I'm either on track or I'm off track.
Yes. And then if I'm not on track, you know what? Don't stuff it. I'm not doing it. You know, it's like an all or nothing mentality. It's just, you know, one day at a time, one meal at a time. It's okay if it's actually just a little bit better than yesterday or a little bit better than last year, then that's still progress.
I think people are black and white because if they feel like they're on the wagon, they feel like, okay, I've got an answer, I'm going to be delivered, it's going to be okay, and that makes them feel safe and secure. And then if they have a bad day, they feel like they've lost control.
Yes.
They feel despairing, and I think that sense of containment and security goes.
Yeah.
And so therefore they just really lose perspective. When the truth is, hey, if that's what you chose to do, so what? However you felt the next day is on you.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world. And if you want to feel better, this is the choices you have.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And then when you are ready to make better choices, this is what you're going to do. So I think that's the other thing is people are like, no,
learning opportunities, you say.
Yeah, they're like, I do want to do better, but I don't know what to eat anymore. Like, again, like someone says I should eat this, but because I have PCOS, I read that you shouldn't be eating that. So again, it is very individualized because again, like if you have a client with PCOS or you have a client with PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Yep. So it's a lot to do with it's a metabolic condition as well as a hormonal condition. So, you know, being very aware about the types of carbohydrates they're eating or the amount of sugar they're consuming is actually going to play a massive part in how well they are and how their PCOS is. So
that's cellular growth on the
cysts over like an overgrowth of cysts on the ovaries. Yeah. And so we know kind more now.
A bit like endometriosis in that same.
Originally. Now we know more. So we know now that it's primarily an endocrine disrupting hormonal disease. It's a lot more to do with blood sugars, the metabolism, the endocrine system versus a hormonal complaint. The hormones regulate it, make it better or worse, but primarily it's something to do with the endocrine system. So it's a lot about blood sugar regulation. So a lot of women with PCOS will have insulin resistance. So again, then that really does mean that they do need to really be aware of what they're eating, what they're putting in their body. So maybe it does put a little extra layer of pressure, I suppose, or a little bit of added stress to, yes, okay, what you are eating is going to make you either better or not, but it still shouldn't come with labels or like negativity or, you know, pressure that if it's not 100% right, then it's wrong.
Yeah. Take down that pressure, absolutely. What about intermittent fasting?
Oh, yeah, dicey conversation. Well, I think, again, like good research for certain things, not so good research in my clinical experience for other things. So I think, again, it's one of those things that people want that quick fix. So if I just don't eat, I'll lose weight.
That's
simple.
Easy.
Don't have to think
cheaper.
about it. Yeah. And to be honest, you know what, I don't blame people sometimes for getting that point because they're so frustrated at nothing working that they're like, I'll try anything. So yeah, there's pretty good research in certain conditions. It actually does really well, I've found, in men. The complexity of women's hormones don't always agree with intermittent fasting. And I think you've really got to, again, assess the whole model and see that that person either has, you know, what else is going on for them? Like, do they have hormonal imbalances? Do they have a thyroid condition? So if you have those things going on, well, intermittent fasting will not be your friend. If anything, it might make things worse.
Really?
Yeah. And so people then are like, but it worked for Karen. I'm like, but Karen doesn't have your thyroid, or, you know, it's just different.
Well, that brings us back to an earlier point you made that I wanted to catch, was you said what I eat might be different. What works for my body might be different for what works for your body.
Yeah.
Now, oh my gosh, do you know, like an apple is good for you and something is not good for you, and this concept of, you know, there's healthy foods and not healthy foods, or quantities, and you know, this sort of like healthy framework to then go and say, okay, but we've got to tailor it to the individual. That's a bit mind-boggling. How the hell do people work out what their personal bodies
Need, or want,
Yeah.
That is a big one, and it's a really good question, because that in itself is super overwhelming. But I think that's where this self-awareness thing comes in, and reading like, how do you feel after you eat certain foods? Okay, so
so you're doing this constant FODMAPs, you're doing this constant kind of like testing your body, really.
Yeah, like what are you, okay, so I've just eaten, let's go ahead and say like a piece of bread. Wow, that piece of bread really made me bloated. But bread's fine, because everyone else says bread's fine, and it's just one piece of bread, but it didn't work for you. So then tune into that. So, okay, is it, but that's one example. And I guess that's also where then I try to, that's also where I think you get someone professional to help you break that down. And you say like, these are my symptoms, what should I be eating? And make them the, the ones who can help you figure that out. But just, I think it's like tapping into the self-awareness and recognizing that if a food doesn't make you feel good, stop eating it. Because just because someone else can eat it doesn't mean you can. So like mild intolerances, you can have gluten intolerance without being fully celiac. And so some people just need to not eat bread or don't eat gluten. But again, like, I think sometimes there's like a denial thing, it's an emotional aspect where they're like, but then if I cut that food, then I can't eat that. And so then I don't, well, that's too much. So sometimes they've also got to get to the point where they're like, okay, the benefits, the point of acceptance, and then the benefits outweigh the negativity of not being able to eat that piece of bread.
And is there a framework where you can do blood tests that tells you what sort of body you have for what sort of foods?
Some people would say yes. I don't know a lot about it / don't know how much I love that idea. I think like you can do food allergy testing, so you can assess what kind of allergies you have. Some of them, I think, again, like are a little bit like hit and miss as to how accurate they are. Just because if you've eaten a lot of something, then no wonder that thing is going to be in your bloodstream. Yeah. So there's a lot of complexity to that, but there are ways of figuring out what's better than other things.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Yes.
I once had a reaction to oranges, but I had eaten a whole box. I didn't want to go to school when I was a kid. And I'm like, if I eat that box of oranges, I'm going to genuinely be sick and I'll get the day off school.
Did you get full diarrhea?
I was so sick.
And vitamin C just flush.
And then it occurred to me I'd rather be at school.
Yeah.
Having a sick day doesn't work if you're sick.
Yeah, I tried a food allergy once on myself, and I was going through this obsession with cashews, and then I did food allergy testing and alas, cashews came up, and I was like devastated until I realised that like you can overeat certain things that are then going to show up. So yeah, I think again you've got to take it with you just be aware, and I think outsource it, like let someone else help you. And then if you don't have any other conditions going on, it's really again just going back to the basics, like we spoke about, from the ground, of a tree, from an animal, something that's like real food.
And even better if you grow it, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of people did that through COVID, right? Like everyone was like, well, we'll be sustainable ourselves. Get a veggie garden. I bet you everyone's veggie gardens are like half dead. Everyone's like, that's done. Back to Woolies.
What about all the dogs that got bought?
Yeah.
It's a lot of dog walking.
A lot of dog walking.
I hope those dogs are still loved.
Yeah.
Bit of a worry.
Thinking about those dogs. Things that keep you up at night.
Darling, thank you so much for coming along. I really, really enjoyed it. Could keep talking for a very long time. But let's come back and do it again.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Everyone, this is Taylah Teschner. And we've been talking about food for mood. And I still haven't learned that word. I can say naturopath.
And then you say naturopathy with a little like, you
naturopathy.
Yeah, bring a bit of snob in it and you'll be fine.
Oh, that's the problem. Okay, so if you want to catch me online, we've got the website, KirstenHunterAuthor.com, Facebook and Instagram, Kirsten Hunter Author, and Twitter, Kirsten Hunter AU. YouTube, Psych in Your Car, and here we are, Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. And you told me I need to say something. What is it?
Like, comment, share.
Help me, people. Please do that. Thank you. See you later, darling.
Bye.